When I found Jessica, she was lying in a pool of blood in the torrential rain. She lost her memory for 3 years, and I took care of her for those 3 years. During those years, she would often furrow her brows and say that I couldn't do anything right. When she regained her memory and returned to her peak, she told the media she didn't know me. Later, at the wedding, I put the ring on the neighboring girl's finger. She stormed in with 900 bodyguards, broke down the door, and pointed a gun at my fiancé's forehead, demanding, "Are you really going to marry her?" I stood in front of my fiancé and replied, "Yes. She doesn't love you." And then, Chapter 1. The day Jessica regained her memory, the old doorbell of my house almost broke from the constant ringing. Outside, there was a group of people in dark suits, shining leather shoes, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne. The man at the front bent respectfully and handed over a gold-embossed business card, saying, "President, the car is waiting for you downstairs." Jessica, or rather, the woman who had been living in the guest bedroom of my house for the past 3 years, the woman I called Jessie, was now standing in front of the bathroom mirror, applying lipstick. Upon hearing the noise, her fingers didn't even pause. After the last stroke of deep red perfectly covered her lips, she slowly turned around. She was still wearing the cotton nightgown I had bargained for at a street stall yesterday. On her feet were plastic slippers that cost 5 yuan, but her eyes had already changed. It was like the surface of a frozen lake, beneath which a sharpened knife gleamed coldly. She swept her gaze over my awkward hands, nervously twisting the edge of my apron, over the box of instant noodles stacked in the corner, and finally, her eyes landed on my face. "This is the fee for the past 3 years, she spoke in a voice colder than I had ever heard. "I'll have my assistant transfer it to you." My throat tightened, and I still held the burnt egg in my hand. The smell of oil clung to my fingers, making my eyes sting. "Jessie," I instinctively called out that familiar name, her brows slightly furrowed, as though she had been touched by something dirty. "It's Jessica," she corrected me, her tone unarguable. "Or, President Jessica." She took the cashmere coat her assistant handed to her, draping it over her shoulders, the expensive fabric instantly crushing the outline of the cheap nightgown. I recognized that coat. It was the store's most prized possession in the mall window last week, and the price tag had so many zeros I lost count. She walked towards the door, and the crowd parted to make way for her. As she passed by, her footsteps paused for a moment. I thought she might turn around, even just to say goodbye. "The coffee machine manual is in the 3rd drawer," she said, her eyes fixed ahead, her voice indifferent. "Next time, don't put the filter in the wrong way." The sound of her high heels tapping on the cement floor was crisp and hollow, each step shattering the last bit of warmth in my cramped living room. The door closed softly behind her, the roar of the engine faded as she left, and the world suddenly grew quiet, leaving only the sizzling sound of the burnt egg in the pan and my own heart pounding like a drum. 3 years passed, like an absurd dream. 3 years ago, on that stormy night, I found her beside the trash can under the company building. Her expensive suit was soaked with blood and mud, her designer handbag tossed a few steps away, and her shattered phone was soaked in a puddle. I carried her back to this 50-square-meter rental apartment, clumsily treated her wounds, cooked white porridge, and kept watch over her high fever. The doctor said her brain had been injured, and she might lose her memory permanently. When she woke up, her eyes were as lost as a child who had wandered off. She complained that my porridge was too thick, that the towel I bought shed hair. She often frowned while watching me fumble with kitchen appliances, giving me the look one would reserve for a failed experiment. "Angelo, you can't even use a coffee machine." I got used to it. I got used to her picky nature, to the occasional instinctive longing for her past life of luxury, and I also got used to my own clumsiness in front of her. I thought life would continue like this, stumbling along, like two sharp-edged stones that, over time, would eventually be worn down into a soft fit. Until today, the dream ended. The stone remained a stone, except one of them was always meant for Mount Everest. My phone vibrated, the screen lighting up, a bank transaction alert. The zeros following the number were enough to buy this old, dilapidated apartment building. The note was cold and impersonal, simply stating, "Service fee." I stared at the string of numbers, my fingertips growing cold. The sunlight outside was perfect, glaring in my eyes. Chapter 2. "So, you really accepted that money?" Monica sipped her lemon tea, her small eyes scanning my face with curiosity. On the bench in the community park, I held a can of beer, the aluminum can slightly dented from my grip. What else could I do? I pulled at the corner of my mouth. Donate it to the Hope Project. I took care of her for 3 years. That money was rightfully mine. Aunt Monica was my mom's card-playing buddy before she passed. In this old neighborhood, she had spent half her life as a matchmaker and a source of gossip. Jessica's dramatic departure had already become the most talked-about gossip among the neighbors. "Foolish boy." Monica poked my forehead with frustration. That was Jessica. Even a speck of dirt from her would be enough for you to live on for 3 generations. Look at you. 3 whole years. You've wasted all that time. Not even a sound of gratitude. And now, you're empty-handed. Well, no, not empty-handed. At least you've got some money. She glanced at my faded jeans and canvas shoes. Her gaze filled with complexity. But the spirit, TSK. It's like a frostbitten eggplant. Monica, let's talk business. About the thing I asked you to do last time. I took a gulp of beer, the cold liquid sliding down my throat without causing a ripple. Oh, right. Monica slapped her thigh, suddenly full of energy, lowering her voice with mystery. Don't worry, Aunt's got it covered. This time, you'll be satisfied. She's good-looking, steady in temperament, and at a glance, she's the type who knows how to live a stable life. She dragged out her words. The most important thing is, she's not after your money. She values character. I forced out a smile. After everything with Jessica, I really didn't have much confidence in my so-called character. Where is she? I asked. She's coming. Monica excitedly pointed to the park entrance. The last glow of the setting sun bathed the figure walking towards us in a soft golden light. She wore a simple off-white cotton linen dress, her long hair loosely tied up, revealing a graceful neck. In her hand, she carried an eco-friendly bag with a hint of green vegetable leaves peeking out. She didn't walk fast, her pace calm and measured, like a breeze in early summer, gently sweeping through the bustling streets. As she drew closer and I saw her face clearly, I realized she wasn't the kind of aggressively stunning beauty like Jessica. Instead, she had a clean, bookish, gentle charm. Her brows and eyes were soft, her nose bridged straight, and her lips naturally tinted a pale pink. When she saw me, she seemed a little shy, lowering her eyelashes slightly, and a barely noticeable blush appeared on her cheeks. This is Vicky. She just moved into our community recently and works at the library. Monica introduced her enthusiastically. This is Angelo. I've watched him grow up. He's an honest kid, a programmer, and has a stable job. Hello, Mr. Angelo. Vicky's voice was light, like a feather brushing against the heart, with a soft southern accent. Why you? Hello. I stood up awkwardly, almost dropping my beer can. She had a faint, comforting scent, like cotton soaked in sunshine, pure and soothing. Monica stepped aside, leaving me and Vicky alone on the bench. The atmosphere was filled with a subtle silence. The setting sun stretched our shadows long. Monica told me. Vicky spoke first, her voice still gentle. You took care of a sick family member for a long time. She didn't mention Jessica by name, nor did her gaze hold any probing curiosity, only a kind understanding. I paused for a moment and nodded. Yeah, for 3 years. She got better, and then left. That must have been really hard. She gazed at the children chasing after a soccer ball in the distance, her tone calm as if stating a fact. Taking care of someone, especially someone who is sick, drains both your mental and physical strength. To stick with it for 3 years, that's really impressive. It felt like something soft had gently brushed against my heart. Over these 3 years, I had heard countless people say, it's worth it, that's Jessica, or you've hit the jackpot, kid, but no one had ever said, that must have been hard. The evening breeze swept past, carrying her pleasant scent. My tense shoulders subtly relaxed in that moment. Chapter 3. Vicky lives on the 3rd floor of the unit next to mine. She was like a gentle breeze, silently blending into my chaotic world. The kitchen, which Jessica once described as completely inefficient, began to show signs of life. Whenever I worked late into the night, hungry and staring hopelessly at the empty fridge, Vicky would just happen to bring over a steaming bowl of spring noodles. The fine, white noodles were topped with a golden soft-boiled egg, green onions scattered on top, and the fragrance would immediately invade my senses. Try it. She would always push the bowl toward me with a soft gaze. I saw your light on and thought you might be hungry. At first, I felt embarrassed, fumbling to pay her. Vicky would smile gently, the corners of her eyes curving sweetly. We're neighbors. It's just a bowl of noodles. Besides, it's lonely eating alone with someone else. It tastes better, like we're all fighting for a taste. When she spoke, the light would fall on her long eyelashes, casting a small, fan-shaped shadow on her face. She seemed to know how to do everything. My 5-year-old laptop, which had been lagging and crashing frequently, miraculously ran smoothly under her delicate fingers. The books on my bookshelf, which were in disarray and covered in dust, were meticulously organized by her into neat categories. Once, my 2-year-old coffee machine, which had never had its filter replaced and had been ridiculed by Jessica as only capable of producing wastewater, was completely disassembled and cleaned by Vicky. When the nutty aroma of coffee started flowing from the machine again, she had a little foam from the cleaning agent on her nose, and she tilted her head to smile at me, her eyes sparkling. Look, it can still last a few more years. That smile was like a spring stream thawing after winter, clear and warm. There was no hint of condescension, no trace of, how can you not even do this on weekends? She suggested that we go grocery shopping together. I pushed the cart, awkwardly trailing behind her, watching as she skillfully moved between the aisles, her fingertips brushing over the fruits and vegetables, her expression focused as she picked the items. She picked up a box of discounted blueberries and put it in the cart, explaining softly, "Blueberries are at their best this season. They're great for making jam or mixing with yogurt." She then picked up a pack of ribs. "They're on sale today. Want to make some soup?" At the checkout, I rushed to scan and pay. Vicky didn't argue. As I grabbed the heavy shopping bags, she naturally extended her hand and took 2 of them. Her fingers brushed lightly against the back of my hand, cool with a slight roughness from calluses. "I'll help carry some. Looks like it's pretty heavy." Her tone was casual. The setting sun cast our shadows closely on the ground. At that moment, the noise of the crowded supermarket, the beeping of the cash register, seemed to fade away. All that remained was the rustling sound of the plastic bags and her steady, gentle breathing as she walked beside me. A long-lost, almost soothing sense of stability quietly spread from the spot where her fingers had brushed against my hand. At the door of my apartment, she took out her keys to open the door, then paused and turned back to me. "By the way, Angelo, when I was organizing the bookshelf, I saw a few old programming books. Do you want me to get rid of them?" I froze for a moment, then remembered they were books I had eagerly bought right after graduation, only for Jessica to later dismiss them as outdated and useless. So I had put them away on a shelf. I felt a little awkward. "Ah, those. They're not of much use anymore. You can get rid of them if you want." Vicky nodded and didn't ask any further. She opened the door, and warm yellow light spilled out from the crack. "See you tomorrow." She waved with a smile, her figure disappearing behind the door. I stood in front of my door, the dim light from the sensor in the hallway casting a soft glow. From the gap in the door next door, the smell of her cooking drifted out, carrying the scent of home. The indentations from the shopping bags still faintly burned in my hands. I looked down at the spot on the back of my hand where the cool touch had lingered, and for the first time, I clearly felt that being taken care of was such a subtle yet powerful force. It wasn't like the storm that rose when Jessica left, but more like the spring noodles Vicky had made for me, quietly soaking into the dry corners, bringing a warm sense of stability. Chapter 4. Deciding to get married felt like a natural, inevitable thing. There were no earth-shattering confessions, no rose petals or diamond rings involved. It was just an ordinary Friday evening, and we were having hot pot together in Vicky's small apartment. The induction cooker bubbled and hummed, the steam fogging up the windows. Vicky picked up a slice of fatty beef and carefully placed it into my bowl, then gently pushed over the dipping sauce she had prepared. "Be careful, it's hot," she reminded me softly. I watched her face, flushed from the steam, with tiny beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Her eyes focused as she fished out shrimp paste from the pot. In that moment, a part of my heart felt completely filled, so steady it was almost unbelievable. "Vicky," I put down my chopsticks, my voice muffled by the steam in the air. "Let's get married." The motion of fishing out the shrimp paste froze midair. Vicky looked up, her eyes bright, gazing at me through the fog. Her eyes were shining, like they were covered in a layer of water. There was a few seconds of silence, the only sound being the bubbling of the hot pot. Then, the corners of her mouth slowly curved upward, her smile spreading like ripples in a lake, growing wider until her eyes and eyebrows were also filled with pure joy. "Yes," she nodded firmly, her voice not loud, but carrying a sense of certainty, as though everything had been decided. She didn't ask why or make any conditions. She simply said, "Yes," with warmth that seemed to seep into my soul. The process of preparing the wedding was busy and full of little details, yet everywhere it reflected Vicky's gentle touch. She didn't drag me to luxury bridal stores or jewelry shops. Instead, we wandered through lively homeware markets and cozy community stores. We navigated the huge blue shelves at IKEA, and she held a little notebook, carefully comparing prices and materials of different plates and bowls, her profile soft and focused under the overhead lights. "How about this bone china? The glaze is thick, the design is simple, and it's easy on the eyes." She picked up a white ceramic bowl and ran her fingertips along the rim. "Whatever you think." I watched her seriously choosing things, and I felt my heart soften completely. The dinnerware Jessica used was top-of-the-line imports, each piece an artwork that I was afraid to touch, lest I leave fingerprints on it. But Vicky's choices were warm and down-to-earth, within reach, and full of comfort. At a neighborhood tailor shop that had been around for more than 10 years, Vicky picked the cheongsam she wanted to wear on our wedding day. It wasn't a glamorous satin fabric, but a simple light apricot-colored silk, with a few sprigs of magnolia embroidered in the same shade. The elderly tailor, wearing reading glasses, carefully took her measurements. "Your figure is truly lovely. This fabric suits you perfectly. It's simple and elegant," the tailor said with a smile. Vicky smiled shyly, pressing her lips together. When the tailor measured her waist, his hand accidentally brushed against her side, and for a moment, Vicky's body stiffened just slightly before she relaxed again. I stood by and watched, admiring the soft curve of her neck as she lowered her head. Like a gentle swan, she insisted on making me a suit as well. She turned down the ready-made suits that cost thousands of dollars and dragged me to the fabric market to pick out materials. How about this wool blend? It's sturdy but soft, and the color is dignified. Her fingers traced the deep blue fabric with a quiet familiarity. In the end, we settled on a modified Zhongshan suit. Simple and neat. During the measurement, the tailor's soft tape measure wrapped around my shoulders and chest. Vicky stood quietly by my side, watching me with eyes as gentle as melted honey. When the tailor measured my arm length, she suddenly spoke softly. "Master, his arm here." She pointed to the area near my shoulder. "Could you widen it by half an inch? He uses a computer a lot, and it's tight here, so it might be uncomfortable for him." I froze, surprised. I hadn't even noticed that small detail myself. The tailor was also taken aback but then smiled. "You're very thoughtful. All right, I'll adjust it." At that moment, the sunlight poured through the old glass windows of the fabric store, and tiny dust particles danced in the beams of light. I looked at Vicky's soft and focused profile, and a warmth that couldn't be described wrapped around my heart. Even more intense than the sunlight outside, the little sharp edges that Jessica had criticized for 3 years as not good enough or unqualified, seemed to have become unique marks, lovingly placed and taken care of by Vicky. To truly be cared for by someone feels like this. She not only accepts all of you but quietly reserves space for you to stretch and breathe, in places you can't even see. Chapter 5. The wedding was held at the small chapel in the community center. The date was chosen by Vicky as she flipped through an old almanac. She said that day was perfect for marriage and settling down. There was no grand spectacle, and the guest list included only Monica, a few close neighbors, and 2 colleagues from my company with whom I was on good terms. On Vicky's side, she said her parents lived far away and were not in good health, so only her cousin, who worked in a neighboring city, could make it. The chapel was simply but warmly decorated. Monica, along with a few enthusiastic aunties, had used red silk and colorful paper to make decorative, happy characters and streamers. On the windowsill were several pots of blooming azaleas Vicky had bought at the flower market, bright red and festive. The air was filled with the subtle scent of lilies and the roasted aroma of sunflower seeds. Vicky wore the light apricot-colored cheongsam, her hair elegantly pinned up with a simple jade hairpin. She wore light makeup, and the gentleness in her eyes was accentuated, making her even more captivating. When she walked out from the lounge and stood at the entrance of the chapel, where the red carpet had been laid, I could clearly hear the thudding of my own heartbeat. Even from a few meters away, sunlight streamed through the windows, casting dappled light on her. She stood there quietly, like a painting that had been lovingly touched by time. The officiant, a retired teacher from the community whom Monica had asked on short notice, spoke in a dialect-accented Mandarin, warmly reading the opening remarks. Vicky and I stood at the end of the red carpet. Her hand gently held my arm, her fingertips cool with a slight tremble that was barely noticeable. I turned my head and saw the shy flush on her cheeks beneath her lowered lashes. "Let's give a warm round of applause to wish the newlyweds happiness." The old teacher's voice was loud and clear. The applause came in sparse waves, mixed with the neighbors' good-natured chuckles and blessings. The chapel was filled with a kind of tacky yet genuine joy. I held Vicky's hand tighter, feeling the strength of her return grip. The warmth between our palms pushed away that slight chill, just as the officiant was about to announce the exchange of rings. Bang! The heavy wooden door of the chapel was suddenly thrown open with a great force. Blinding sunlight rushed in, casting long shadows of the figures standing in the doorway, carrying a cold, oppressive air. The chapel went silent in an instant. All the laughter and blessings seemed to be paused. The neighbors gaped, and Monica dropped her sunflower seeds all over the floor. In the backlight, a tall figure stepped forward, each step on the red carpet sharp and deliberate, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, her hair tightly styled, her face cold and composed. Jessica. Behind her were 2 bodyguards in black suits, wearing earpieces, their expressions grim and their presence like that of sentinels. Time seemed to freeze. The festive flower scent in the air was replaced by a chilling, almost smoky atmosphere. Jessica's gaze was like a spotlight, sweeping over the room, finally settling on the hands that Vicky and I were holding. Her eyes, colder than they had been 3 years ago when she left, carried an emotionless, scrutinizing look, almost like evaluating merchandise, with a faint, barely perceptible edge of offended hostility. She walked straight up to us, stopping just a step away from Vicky. Her powerful aura seemed to make the surrounding air thinner. Vicky instinctively tightened her grip on my arm, and I could feel her body tense, her complexion draining of color. Jessica's gaze pierced through Vicky's face like an ice pick, her lips curling into a smile that lacked any warmth. "Angelo." Her voice wasn't loud, but it clearly struck every strained nerve in the room. Cold as metal, Your taste in women really hasn't changed in 10 years. How disappointing. She slightly tilted her head and gestured with her eyes. One of her bodyguards stepped forward, moving lightning fast. His large, gloved hand, like an iron claw, clamped tightly around Vicky's slender wrist. The force was so intense that Vicky gasped in pain. Her body yanked off balance, and her wrist instantly turned bright red with marks. Let go of her. My mind went blank, blood rushing to my head. Without thinking, I started to rush toward them. The second bodyguard immediately stepped in front of Jessica, like an unmovable wall, his cold gaze locking onto me. Jessica ignored the chaos unfolding before her. She simply leaned in slightly, her cold gaze drawing closer to Vicky's pale face, which was now drained of color from the pain and shock. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper, but with a venomous coldness. It clearly reached our ears. Miss Vicky, or should I say, Nightingale, you've been lurking by his side for so long. Must have been quite exhausting. She paused, savoring the look of horror that suddenly overtook Vicky's eyes. Too bad. Your wedding gift about the falling star system's core architecture. I'm afraid it won't be delivered after all. Chapter 6, Nightingale. The word hit me like two icy bullets, crashing into my eardrums, instantly freezing all my blood and thoughts. Falling star? That was the next-generation AI project recently launched by Jessica's tech company, which had shocked the industry. It was hailed as the crown jewel, with security so tight it was a top company secret. I turned my gaze sharply toward Vicky. Her face was as pale as paper, her body trembling slightly under the bodyguard's iron grip, cold sweat beating at her forehead. Her eyes, usually warm and gentle, now held an overwhelming fear, disbelief, and a glimmer of hopelessness, as though she had been exposed and had nowhere to hide. No, it's not like that. Her lips trembled, her voice broken and desperate as she struggled to free herself from the bodyguard's grip. The red marks on her wrist quickly turned a dark bruise. Angelo, listen to me. Listen to what? Jessica straightened, looking down at her from above, like a predator watching a helpless insect. Her tone dripped with biting sarcasm. Do you want to tell me how you schemed to get close to him? How you used his identity as a programmer to slowly extract information about the Falling Star project, even the peripheral details? How your innocent-looking face hides so many shady tasks? Each word felt like a poisonous whip, slashing at my heart. All the warm memories, the late-night spring noodles, the repaired laptop, the organized bookshelf, the gentle advice during our fitting, were instantly torn apart, revealing the monstrous truth that could have been hiding beneath. I didn't mean to hurt him. Vicky suddenly looked up, tears streaming down her face. Her eyes were wide with panic and pleading as she looked at me, a look I had never seen before. Angelo, I truly care about you. I truly care. Jessica sneered, the sound sharp and mocking. What's the worth of Nightingale's true intentions? Isn't the rule of your deep web organization that the end justifies the means, including using your body and emotions as weapons? She raised her hand slightly, and immediately, one of her bodyguards stepped forward, handing her a thin, sharp-edged envelope. Jessica pinched the envelope between two fingers, like she was holding something filthy, casually waving it in front of her. This contains encrypted screenshots of every piece of information you've passed along, the login traces of your access to the deep web, and the real identity and entry records of your cousin. Would you like me to read this aloud in front of your true-hearted husband so he can finally see who's really lying next to him? The chapel was deathly silent. The neighbors stared in shock at the scene unfolding before them, unable to comprehend what was happening. Monica covered her mouth, too frightened to speak. Only Vicky's muffled, broken sobs echoed in the cold air. I stood frozen, my limbs numb, as though I was nailed to the red carpet. My mind was a whirlwind. Jessica's cold words and Vicky's desperate eyes tearing me apart. The foundation of trust collapsed in an instant, revealing the bottomless darkness underneath. I looked at the glaring bruise on her wrist, at her tear-streaked face, and my heart felt as if it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, aching to the point of suffocation. Why? My voice was hoarse and dry, like sandpaper rubbing against stone. Why me? Vicky's sobs paused for a moment. She lifted her tearful eyes, gazing at me through the blurred water in her eyes. Her lips moved a few times before forming a broken whisper. Because, only by your side. I feel like a person. Her words hit me like a weak electric current, piercing through the fog of anger and betrayal clouding my mind. But Jessica's icy voice quickly snuffed out this fleeting light. Such a touching confession. She clapped slowly, the sound echoing in the silent chapel, striking an out of place. Too bad. It's too late. She turned to face me, her gaze sharp as a blade. Angelo, are you seeing it clearly now? Is this the woman you chose? A calculating, lying commercial spy who could drag you into an abyss at any moment? Come with me. This farce is over. Her tone carried a commanding sense of entitlement, as if I were still the Angelo from 3 years ago, obedient, clumsy, and forever spinning in circles around her coffee machine. Her bodyguards released their grip on Vicky's wrist, but they still stood like iron towers behind her, waiting for her next command, either to take me away or deal with this problem. Vicky staggered, almost falling to the ground. She clutched her throbbing wrist, her tear-filled eyes locking onto mine, her gaze filled with endless sorrow and the despair of awaiting judgment. Her simple cheongsam was now stained with dust, like a magnolia flower battered by the storm. At the end of the red carpet, the artificial flowers on the officiant's podium still looked vibrant. On the guest seats, scattered sunflower seeds and wedding candy glistened with cheap, meaningless light. The lily fragrance in the air was now completely overtaken by the smell of gunpowder. I stood between the two women, one representing the cold, powerful, and unquestionable past and reality, the other representing warmth, deception, and the unknown abyss that could lead to eternal damnation. The red carpet beneath my feet had never felt so hot, and yet it had never felt so cold. Chapter 7. Jessica's hand hovered in midair. Her well-maintained nails, perfectly shaped and rounded, gleamed coldly under the chapel's harsh white lights. The remnants of victory, the unwavering confidence on her face, froze the moment my words fell, then cracked open with an incredulous gap. "What did you say?" Her voice was lowered, as though squeezed out between clenched teeth, filled with a simmering, repressed fury from a deep sense of offense. I didn't look at Jessica. My eyes bypassed her cold shoulder and landed on Vicky, who was slumped on the floor behind her. Vicky was staring back at me, her face a mix of tear tracks, bruises, and the same overwhelming shock, as though she couldn't understand the words I had just spoken. I took a deep breath, the emotion surging in my chest like lava ready to explode, scorching my throat. I bent down awkwardly, reaching into a simple, eco-friendly bag that had been kicked to the edge of the red carpet during the chaos. I pulled out a sandwich wrapped carefully in plastic wrap. There were a few oil stains on the wrap, and the sandwich wasn't perfectly shaped. One corner of the bread had slightly collapsed due to being squeezed. I lifted it up, holding it in front of Jessica, and in front of the stunned eyes of everyone. Because of this, my voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, carrying a calmness as if I were putting everything on the line. "She made this for me this morning, before dawn, because I was up late working yesterday and had stomach pains all night." The chapel was so silent you could hear a pin drop. All eyes were fixed on the cheap, awkward, even slightly ugly sandwich. Whole wheat bread with a fried egg with slightly crispy edges, a few lettuce leaves, and a thick layer of mashed potatoes. No expensive ingredients, no intricate plating. "You say she's a spy. She lied to me. She has ulterior motives." "Maybe you're right." I looked directly into Jessica's eyes, where my disheveled yet determined image was reflected. "For the past 3 years, I've been spinning around you like a top, always afraid that something I did would be wrong, or that I'd act stupid. You have stomach issues, so I researched recipes, learned how to make all kinds of soups, carefully serving them to you. You'd take a sip, say it was too salty, like dishwater, and pour the whole bowl away." Jessica's pupils seemed to shrink, her jaw tightening. "I stayed up late organizing the project data you needed, the ones I didn't even understand, and then went to work the next day with dark circles under my eyes. You said I was inefficient, that I couldn't even sort basic data properly, dragging down your progress." My voice started to tremble, not from fear, but from the pent-up frustration and anger finally finding an outlet. "I'm clumsy, I know. I couldn't use those high-end coffee machines, couldn't make the 82-degree hand-poured coffee you wanted. I couldn't afford the brands you liked, so I'd buy you a scarf from a street stall, and you'd throw it into the storage room without even unwrapping it, saying it wasn't up to your standards." Each word felt like a blunt knife, slicing through the dust-covered memories and reopening my own scabbed-over wounds. Those efforts that had been lightly dismissed, taken for granted, and trampled upon were now laid bare for everyone to see. But her. I suddenly pointed at Vicky on the floor, my voice rising sharply with a lump in my throat. She saw me with stomach pain and would quietly go make millet porridge for me. She remembered that I needed space for my arm when making clothes and had to loosen it half an inch. She'd see dusty old books on my shelf and ask if I needed them, instead of mocking them as outdated and useless. Even the simplest meal, like noodles, even if she put too much salt, she'd smile and say, "Next time, put less," instead of throwing it away. I gripped that sandwich tightly, the rough edge of the plastic wrap digging into my palm, causing sharp pain. "Jessica, you ask me why I chose her." I forced out a smile that was uglier than tears, my vision blurry, but I kept my gaze fixed on her. Because of this damn sandwich, because only she cares about my stomach pains, only she treats me like a human being, not like some tool that can be called and discarded, stupid and useless. After shouting the last words, it felt as if I had used every ounce of my strength. My chest heaved violently, and there was a metallic, sweet taste rising in my throat. The sandwich was tightly clenched in my hand, the bread deformed, the mashed potatoes spilling from the edges. The chapel fell into absolute silence. Monica covered her face, her shoulders shaking. The neighbors exchanged glances, their expressions mixed and complex. The bodyguards Jessica had brought with her, with their eternally cold and murderous expressions, seemed to have shifted ever so slightly. Jessica stood there like a perfect ice sculpture. Her meticulous makeup couldn't hide the paleness of her face. She looked at me, her eyes fluctuating violently with shock, disbelief, rage at being defied, and a trace of unfamiliar, uncomprehending vulnerability and doubt. She opened her mouth, as if to say something, but all that came out was a cold, mocking laugh. Heh. Her gaze flicked over the misshapen sandwich, over Vicky's disheveled form on the floor, before finally landing back on my face. Her eyes rose once again to look down at me, like she was observing an irrational madman. Angelo, you're so stupid, hopelessly so. She turned sharply, the sound of her high heels on the red carpet sharp and final, and she walked toward the door without looking back. The two bodyguards immediately followed. Like two silent clouds of darkness, the heavy wooden door opened again, and the blinding sunlight rushed in, only to be cut off as the door closed once more. The chapel was left in the silence of survival, thick with an awkwardness that could hardly be dispelled. I staggered for a moment before barely managing to stand upright. I looked down at the sandwich in my hand, now misshapen. The warmth and the lingering scent of the food, even through the crumpled plastic wrap, stubbornly reached into my palm. Chapter 8. The sound of sirens grew louder and closer, shattering the suffocating silence in the small chapel. When Vicky was taken away, she was unnervingly calm. She didn't look at me again. She simply lowered her head, allowing the female officer to cuff her wrists. The dusty apricot-colored cheongsam made her bruised wrists and the cold gleam of the handcuffs even more glaring. Just before leaving, her steps faltered slightly, and she whispered, "I'm sorry, Angelo." Her voice was so soft it was almost a sigh, quickly dissipating in the air. Monica and the neighbors gathered around, offering words of comfort, their eyes filled with sympathy and the relief of having survived the ordeal. I felt like a puppet, mechanically responding, my mind a blank void. The carefully arranged chapel now lay in ruins, with scattered red paper scraps, crushed wedding candies, overturned chairs. It looked like the aftermath of a grand yet absurd farce. In the days that followed, I locked myself in the 50-square-meter rental apartment. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out all light and sound from the outside world. The phone screen flickered on and off, filled with Monica's concerned messages and the company's inquiries about my vacation. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scenes from the wedding over and over in my mind. Jessica's cold eyes, the bodyguard's rough grip, Vicky's desperate tears, and that misshapen sandwich I had clenched in my hand. The truth felt like a blunt knife, slowly and mercilessly cutting through my nerves. The police investigation later confirmed Jessica's claims. Vicky, or rather, codenamed Nightingale, belonged to the notorious international commercial espionage organization known as Deep Web. Her goal was clear: to use my position as a peripheral programmer to gather any scrap of information about the Falling Star project, the coincidentally repaired laptops, the accidentally seen project document screenshots. Even my complaints during late-night work could all be part of the puzzle she was piecing together. Her so-called cousin was actually her contact in the organization. The evidence Jessica presented was irrefutable. A wave of nausea swept over me. I rushed into the bathroom, gagging at the toilet, but nothing came out. The face in the mirror was pale and gaunt, with deep shadows under the eyes, looking like a wandering soul. The anger of being deceived, the shame of being used, and the despair of having my nearly pathetic longing for warmth completely crushed tangled together, nearly tearing me apart. But what terrified me more was that every time my anger and hatred reached their peak, other images would unexpectedly flash through my mind. Her eyes shining with light as she fixed the coffee machine, the gentle curve of her face when she whispered, half an inch wider, during the fitting, that unreservedly joyful smile when she heard me say, "Let's get married," amidst the steam of the hot pot. These images were so vivid, so real that I couldn't believe that from beginning to end. It had all been a meticulously crafted performance. When the police came to take my final statement, the officer in charge was an experienced middle-aged man. He closed the notebook and looked at me, his expression heavy. He sighed. "Mr. Angelo, I know this is hard to accept, but in our line of work, we see a lot of things. Some hunters go so far as to become the prey themselves, so deeply immersed in the role that they even fool themselves. It's not impossible." He paused for a moment, his voice tinged with an almost imperceptible complexity. "That Vicky, or Nightingale, she became very unstable during the later stages of the interrogation. She kept repeating one thing." I shot up, my heart clenching as if an invisible hand had grabbed it. The officer met my gaze and spoke slowly. She said, "That bowl of noodles was real. That bowl of noodles was real." Those words felt like stones thrown into stagnant water, sending ripples through the frozen lake of my heart, stirring up a storm of confusion and pain, anger, doubt, sorrow, and a faint, almost imperceptible, a sense of bewilderment, once again drowning me. Chapter 9. Time is the most incompetent yet the most effective quack doctor. It cannot erase scars, but it can dull and numb the sharp pain, making it bearable over time. I cut my hair, shaved my beard, and went back to work. My colleagues tacitly avoided mentioning the absurd wedding, but there was a new kind of cautious sympathy in their eyes. Life returned to its programmed rhythm, writing code, fixing bugs, ordering takeout, and staring at the silent wall of the next-door apartment late at night. Vicky was sentenced to prison, and her term was not short. I didn't go to the hearing. Monica, through various channels, got the news and told me with a sigh. That girl, during the trial, she was very quiet, and she confessed clearly. When the judge asked her if she had anything to say, she stayed silent for a long time before she finally said, "I'm sorry, Angelo, that bowl of noodles was real." Monica wiped her eyes. Sigh. What is this all about? That bowl of noodles was real. The words echoed in my mind like a spell, looping in my brain from time to time. They couldn't wash away the stain of betrayal, but they were like a tiny thorn, lodged somewhere deep in my heart, occasionally causing a secret, unspeakable ache. Jessica never showed up again. Her tech empire continued to thrive, with the Falling Star project being a massive success. Her name appeared frequently on business headlines and in technology reports. Basking in glory, she and I became two parallel lines, never to cross, separated by an insurmountable chasm of class and a past too painful to revisit. Life seemed to settle down for real, until one stuffy summer evening. The air was thick and sticky, as if it could be wrung out into water. The dark clouds hung low over the city, brewing a storm ready to burst. I had just finished working overtime and was dragging my tired body out of the office building when the familiar dull pain in my stomach started again, probably from the half-hearted takeout dinner I'd had earlier. I turned into a familiar alley, planning to stop by the convenience store I frequented for some stomach medicine. Through the bright glass windows of the store, I saw an unexpected figure, Jessica. She was standing by a sparse tree on the sidewalk, no bodyguards in sight, and no flashy sports car parked nearby. She wore a well-tailored off-white casual outfit, lacking the sharpness of her usual corporate armor, but still, she seemed out of place. She seemed to be waiting for someone, her gaze absent, fixed on the neon lights flashing across the street. Her side profile, illuminated by the cold white light from the convenience store, appeared worn and unusually lost. I instinctively tried to avoid her, but the sharp pain in my stomach intensified, and I couldn't help but bend over, letting out a quiet groan. "What's wrong?" A cold voice sounded from very close. I looked up in surprise. Jessica had somehow moved in front of me, her brow furrowed as she looked at my hand clutching my stomach. "It's nothing." I straightened up, answering stiffly, trying to move past her. "Stomach pain." She made no move to step aside, her sharp eyes scanning my pale face. "Old problem." Her tone was devoid of concern, more like a professional confirmation. I bit my lip, unwilling to answer. The feeling of being scrutinized was suffocating, just like it had been 3 years ago. Just as the awkward tension hung in the air, large raindrops suddenly began to fall. In an instant, the rain joined together in sheets, pouring down like a flood, accompanied by the booming sound of thunder. Pedestrians screamed and scattered in all directions. Both Jessica and I were caught off guard and instantly drenched to the bone. "Over there." Jessica reacted quickly, grabbing my wrist with considerable force and, without a word, pulling me toward a narrow bus shelter that could barely fit 2 or 3 people, seeking refuge from the downpour. Inside the cramped space, a few other drenched individuals huddled together, all equally desperate to escape the storm. I stood close to Jessica, our clothes soaked through, the cold dampness clinging to our bodies, and we could both feel the same chill from the rain and an awkward warmth from our proximity. The rain ran down from her hair and face, washing away the fine makeup, revealing a faint exhaustion underneath. She tilted her head slightly, staring out at the torrential downpour, her lips pressed tightly together, silent. The air was filled only with the sound of rain pouring down and the murmurs of nearby people complaining about the weather. The cramping pain in my stomach worsened in the cold and dampness, and I couldn't help but bend over, groaning softly. Here, a square object wrapped in plastic was suddenly shoved into my hand. I looked down, surprised to see a box of basic aluminum magnesium chewable tablets, the most common stomach medicine found at any convenience store. I looked up, startled, meeting Jessica's face, which remained expressionless. Her gaze briefly flickered over my face before turning back to the white haze of rain outside. Her tone as flat as if discussing the weather. "I bought it at the store just now. You can make do with it." I held the small box in my hand, the plastic wrapper making a faint sound as I gripped it with my damp fingers. The box still held the warmth of her palm. The rainwater trickled into my eyes, blurring my vision. I looked at this version of Jessica, drenched by the rain, with some of her armor removed, making her seem strangely unfamiliar. Then I looked at the cheap medicine in my hand, and my mind felt like it had just spilled all its emotions at once. She remembered. She remembered that I had stomach issues. That realization hit me harder than the medicine itself, stirring up emotions I couldn't name. Was it a habit of someone in power, trying to maintain control? Or was it a small, unspoken attempt at making amends, something she hadn't even realized herself? The rain showed no signs of stopping. In the cramped shelter, the air was thick with humidity and tension. I silently ripped open the packaging, took 2 tablets, and chewed them dry. The slightly sweet, bitter taste spread across my mouth. About the wedding day, Jessica suddenly spoke, her voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. She didn't look at me, still staring out into the downpour. I've thought about what you said for a long time. My heart skipped a beat. The chewing stopped. You said I treated you like a tool, that you were stupid, that the soup you made tasted like dishwater. Her words came slowly, as though she were carefully choosing them, with a rare and almost puzzled sincerity. I admit, back then, I was so used to valuing efficiency, so used to measuring everything by results. The soup you made might have just not been to my taste, but I shouldn't have said that. She paused, as if the next words were even harder to say. The rain beat relentlessly against the roof of the bus shelter, like the sound of tiny drum beats. As for Vicky, she finally turned her face towards me. Her eyes, washed by the rain, no longer held their usual sharpness. Instead, they appeared dark and complex, like a deep pool. I found out more. The methods used to control the members of Deep Web, they're dirty. Her mission to get close to you was real, but she furrowed her brows slightly, as if searching for the right words. The key information she sent out at the end was fake. Fake. I widened my eyes, staring at her in disbelief. She altered the core data. Jessica's voice was soft, but it hit me like a thunderclap, ringing in my ears. In a very covert way, she misled her superior. This directly caused a major failure in a crucial operation against Falling Star, with significant losses. That's why she was completely abandoned by the organization and exposed so quickly, so thoroughly. The sound of the rain seemed to fade away in that moment. I clenched the wet medicine box tightly, the plastic edges digging into my palm, causing a sharp pain. Vicky's last broken words, "I never meant to hurt him," and her statement during the trial, "That bowl of noodles was real," were like 2 blinding lights that suddenly cut through the dense fog clouding my heart. She betrayed her own organization, in the most dangerous way. For what? My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, aching, swollen, almost unable to breathe. Why are you telling me this? My voice came out dry and hoarse. Jessica shifted her gaze, looking back at the white world outside, her side profile blurred by the rain's reflection. After a long pause, long enough that I thought she wouldn't answer, she finally spoke softly, her voice nearly drowned out by the pouring rain. "Maybe because I also want to know how real a bowl of noodles can really be." Chapter 10. 5 years is enough to change a lot. My job shifted from being a programmer at a typical tech company to becoming a key technical member at a small but relaxed startup. I moved out of the old community filled with memories and into a new neighborhood closer to the company, with a better environment. Life was still busy, but without some of the invisible shackles, and the old stomach pains rarely bothered me anymore. The name Vicky, along with that absurd wedding, was carefully sealed away in the depths of my memory. Only on certain quiet nights, or when passing by a street vendor that smells of food, would a faint, dull ache pass over my chest. No longer sharp but still present, Monica occasionally brought up "that girl," sighing a few words before quickly changing the subject to eagerly introduce me to potential new matches, which I would politely decline with a smile. As for Jessica, she remained the CEO at the pinnacle of the tech world, shining brightly. Her news still dominated the headlines, though articles about her personal life had almost disappeared. We were like 2 planets running on different orbits, with no intersection. That summer storm, the cheap stomach medicine, and her bewildering words about "a bowl of noodles" had all become a blurry, damp fragment of memory. It was another deep autumn. The sky was as blue as if it had been washed clean, the sun offering just the right amount of warmth. Our company had taken on a new project, and after months of working overtime, it was finally delivered successfully this morning. The tension in my chest suddenly eased, and exhaustion surged over me like a tidal wave. I turned down my colleague's invitation to dinner, wanting nothing more than to go home and collapse into bed. As I stepped out of the office building's revolving door, the warm afternoon sun hit me squarely, making it hard to keep my eyes open. I squinted, instinctively raising a hand to shield my eyes. In that moment, with the light and shadows mingling and my vision blurred, a deep blue long-handled umbrella appeared above my head, steady and silent, just the right amount of shade, blocking the harsh sunlight. I froze, surprised, and turned my head. The umbrella was slightly raised. The person beneath it was wearing a soft off-white turtleneck sweater, her long hair loosely pinned back, a few strands hanging at the sides of her face. Her face looked slimmer now, the gentle roundness gone, replaced by sharper features. Yet, Oddly, it carried a kind of peaceful tranquility that only time could have refined. The sunlight filtered through the sparse sycamore branches, casting dappled shadows on her. She stood there quietly, her gaze as gentle as a calm autumn afternoon lake, reflecting my astonished face. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. The noisy crowd in the building, the hustle of the street traffic, all faded away like waves retreating. The world was so quiet, only the rustling sound of wind passing through the leaves, and the clear, steady rhythm of our breathing remained. She looked at me, the corners of her lips curving into a small smile. It was soft, but like a stone dropped into the middle of a lake, it created ripples of warmth that spread to the deepest corners of her eyes. Angelo. Her voice was soft, with a huskiness born of time apart, but it brushed against my heart like a feather, instantly awakening all the dormant memories and warmth. Long time no see.